The winter of 1873 brought nothing but misery to Millicent Grayson, as she stood trembling outside the only bakery in Redemption Creek, Colorado, clutching her 6-month-old daughter against her chest to shield the infant from the biting cold. Beneath the threadbare shawl, little Sarah whimpered softly, her cries growing weaker with each passing day of hunger. Millicent had not eaten in 3 days, saving the last of her meager supplies to make watery porridge for her baby, but even that was gone now. The bell above the bakery door jingled as Millicent pushed inside, the warmth and aroma of freshly baked bread nearly bringing her to her knees. Behind the counter, Mr. Peterson, a heavy-set man with flour dusting his apron, looked up with disinterest until he recognized the young widow. His face immediately hardened. "Mrs. Grayson, I've told you before, no more credit. You already owe more than you can pay." Millicent swallowed hard, her throat dry and painful. "Please, Mr. Peterson, just 1 loaf. My baby hasn't eaten properly in days." "And that's a terrible shame, madam, but my own children need feeding too. Business is business." She drew a shaky breath, gathering courage for what she was about to propose. Slowly, she pulled back the shawl, revealing Sarah's tiny face, her cheeks no longer chubby but growing hollow. "My husband's pocket watch," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's gold, worth far more than bread." Mr. Peterson shook his head. "Already tried selling it to the pawnbroker when your husband died, remember? It's brass with gold plating, nearly worthless." Desperation clawed at Millicent's insides, her vision blurred with tears as she glanced down at Sarah's face. "Then," her voice broke, "then my wedding ring wouldn't cover half what you owe." The bakery suddenly felt too warm, too close. Millicent could feel herself swaying slightly as black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She hadn't eaten in so long. "Then," she whispered, the words catching in her throat like shards of glass, "I can work, for you or your wife, cleaning, cooking, anything, and Sarah." She couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Peterson's eyes widened with understanding. "Are you suggesting I take your child as payment? Just until I can earn enough to—" "That's enough," came a deep voice from behind her. Millicent turned to find a tall man filling the doorway, his broad shoulders dusted with snow. He wore a worn leather duster over practical clothes, a gun belt at his hip, and a Stetson pulled low over his eyes. When he stepped fully into the light, she could see he was perhaps 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Quinn Hayes," he introduced himself with a slight nod toward Millicent before turning his attention to Peterson. "I'll take 3 loaves of your best bread, a pound of butter, and whatever preserves you've got." The baker's demeanor immediately changed. "Yes, sir, Mr. Hayes, right away." While Peterson bustled about filling the order, the stranger Hayes studied Millicent carefully. "Madam, no disrespect intended, but I couldn't help overhearing." Millicent clutched Sarah tighter, shame burning her cheeks. "It's not your concern, sir." "Maybe not," he agreed, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But I've got a proposition that might interest you more than giving up your child for a loaf of bread." She stiffened. "I'm not that kind of woman, Mr. Hayes." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Never thought you were. I've got a ranch about 3 miles out of town. Need someone to cook and keep house. Previous housekeeper left to get married last month." Peterson returned with the food wrapped in brown paper. Hayes paid without looking at the cost. "Madam," Hayes continued, "I'm offering honest work with fair pay. You'll have your own cabin on the property. And you'll eat at my table, both of you, starting tonight." Sarah whimpered again, and Millicent felt her resolve crumbling. "Why would you help strangers?" he shrugged. "I've been hungry before. No one should have to choose between their child and food." He picked up his packages and headed for the door. "My wagon's outside if you're coming." Millicent hesitated only a moment before following him. The alternative was unthinkable. The wagon ride was silent except for the creaking of wheels and the occasional snort from the team of horses. Millicent held Sarah close, wondering if she had just made another terrible mistake in a long line of them. Her husband, Thomas, had brought her west with promises of prosperity, only to die of fever 6 months after Sarah's birth, leaving her alone in a town where she knew almost no one. "Your little one, what's her name?" Hayes asked, breaking the silence. "Sarah. Pretty name." He glanced at the bundle in her arms. "How old?" 6 months, he nodded. "Ranch isn't much to look at, but it's growing. Started with just 10 acres 3 years ago, up to 160 now." He spoke matter-of-factly, not boasting, just providing information. As they crested a small rise, Millicent saw the ranch spread out before them, a modest main house, a barn, corrals, and a bunkhouse. A smaller cabin sat about 50 yards from the main house. "That'll be yours," Hayes said, pointing to the cabin. "Used to be mine before I built the main house." The wagon rolled to a stop, and before Millicent could move, Hayes was at her side, offering his hand to help her down. His touch was warm and steady, nothing like Thomas's had been. Thomas had been a dreamer with soft hands and grand plans. Hayes had the calloused grip of a man who worked his own land. "Quincy, that you?" a voice called from the barn. Hayes grimaced slightly. "Just Quinn, if you don't mind, madam. Only my mother calls me Quincy." An older man with a shock of white hair emerged from the barn. "'Bout time you got back. Cattle in the north pasture are looking peaky. Bart, this is Mrs. Grayson and her daughter Sarah. They'll be staying in the old cabin. Mrs. Grayson's our new housekeeper." Bart's bushy eyebrows rose as he took in Millicent's threadbare coat and the thin bundle that was Sarah. "Well now, that's fine news. Place ain't been the same since Martha left." He tipped his hat to Millicent. "Bartholomew Stevens, madam. Foreman around these parts, though the boss likes to think he's in charge." Despite everything, Millicent found herself smiling at the easy banter between the two men. "Let's get you settled," Hayes said, retrieving her small carpet bag from the wagon, all she had left in the world. He led her to the cabin, opening the door to reveal a simple but clean interior. A fireplace dominated one wall with a rocking chair pulled close. A bed with a patchwork quilt stood in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs in another. Through a doorway, she could see a small kitchen area. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically. "It's more than we had," she replied honestly. He nodded, seeming to understand all she didn't say. "I'll get a fire going. You and the little one must be freezing." As he knelt by the fireplace, expertly arranging kindling and logs, Millicent watched him. There was something about the careful, methodical way he moved that spoke of a man accustomed to taking care of things himself. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked suddenly. Hayes didn't look up from his task. "Told you, need a housekeeper. There must be women in town who would take the position, women without the complication of a baby." The fire caught and he stood, brushing his hands on his pants. "Maybe. But none of them were about to trade their child for bread." His eyes, when they met hers, were steady and unreadable. "Supper's at 6 in the main house. I'll come get you." With that, he left her alone in the cabin that was suddenly more home than anywhere she'd been in months. True to his word, Hayes appeared at her door at 6 o'clock sharp. Millicent had spent the afternoon exploring the cabin, marveling at the well-stocked pantry and the small cradle someone had placed beside the bed. She'd washed both herself and Sarah with water heated on the stove, and changed into her one remaining decent dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been her Sunday best. Hayes's eyes widened slightly when she opened the door, but he made no comment beyond a polite, "Madam," as he offered his arm to escort her to the main house. The main house was rustic but comfortable, with a large fireplace, sturdy furniture, and surprisingly tasteful touches that spoke of a desire for something more than mere functionality. The dining room table was set for 3: Hayes, herself, and Bart, who was already seated when they arrived. "Mrs. Grayson, please sit," Hayes said, pulling out a chair for her. "Can I hold the little one while you eat?" Millicent hesitated. No one but herself had held Sarah since Thomas died. "I've got 8 nieces and nephews back in Missouri," he explained, as if sensing her reluctance. "I know my way around babies." She carefully handed Sarah to him, surprised at how natural he looked cradling her tiny daughter. Even more surprising was how Sarah, usually wary of strangers, settled contentedly in his arms. The meal was simple but abundant: beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Millicent tried to eat slowly to show manners, but hunger got the better of her. Hayes said nothing, simply serving her a second helping before she'd even finished the first. "Tomorrow we can discuss your duties," Hayes said as they finished their meal. "For tonight, just rest, you and Sarah both." Later, as Millicent lay in the most comfortable bed she'd slept in for months, with Sarah finally peaceful beside her, she wondered about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place. She had been ready to do the unthinkable, to give up her precious child, and instead found herself and Sarah safely sheltered and fed. Quinn Hayes was an enigma, a rough-looking cowboy with gentle hands and eyes that seemed to see right through her pretense of strength. She didn't trust it. Couldn't trust it. Life had taught her that nothing came without a price. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Millicent cooked and cleaned for Hayes and his small crew of ranch hands. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt useful. Sarah thrived with regular meals and a warm place to sleep, her cheeks filling out, her cries becoming the strong, healthy demands of a growing baby. Hayes was often gone from dawn until dusk working his land, but he always made time to ask about her day, to bounce Sarah on his knee, to bring small gifts: a ribbon for Millicent's hair, a wooden rattle he'd carved himself for Sarah. 2 weeks after her arrival, Millicent was hanging laundry when she spotted Hayes riding hard toward the ranch, his normally composed face tight with concern. "Problem?" she called as he dismounted. "Wolves got into the north pasture last night, lost 3 calves." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing on end. "Bart and the boys are setting up a watch rotation. I'll take first shift tonight. I'll pack you some food." His smile was quick but genuine. "Appreciate it." That evening, as she prepared a bundle of food for his night watch, Millicent found herself humming a lullaby, the same one she sang to Sarah. She caught herself, surprised by the contentment she felt. When Hayes came to collect the food, he paused in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her work. "You've changed things around in here," she glanced up, suddenly worried. "I hope you don't mind, it seemed more practical this way." "No, it's good, better." He stepped fully into the room. "This place hasn't felt like a home in a long time, not since my parents passed. You grew up here?" She asked, realizing how little she knew about him. He nodded, running a finger along the edge of the table. "Pa homesteaded this land when I was 10. Ma tried to make it homey, but after she died." He shrugged. "Guess I didn't see the point." The simple admission touched something in Millicent. She understood loss, the emptiness it left behind. "I should get going," he said, taking the bundle she offered. "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson." "Millicent," she said impulsively, "or Millie. No one calls me Mrs. Grayson except people trying to collect debts." His smile reached his eyes this time. "Millie then, and I'm just Quinn." For 3 nights wolves harassed the herd, and for 3 nights Quinn took the watch. On the 4th morning he returned victorious but exhausted, a wolf pelt tied to his saddle. "The pack's moved on," he announced over breakfast. "Should be quiet for a while now." Millicent noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way his shoulders drooped slightly. "You need rest," she said firmly. "Go sleep. I'll wake you for supper." He looked like he might argue, then nodded, too tired to protest. Later, when she went to call him for the evening meal, she found him sprawled across his bed, still in his clothes, one arm flung over his eyes. She should have left, given him privacy, but something kept her rooted to the spot. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened. He looked younger, vulnerable in a way he never allowed himself to be while awake. As if sensing her presence, Quinn stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. For a long moment neither spoke. "Sorry," she said finally. "Supper's ready." He sat up slowly, running a hand over his face. "Didn't mean to sleep so long, you needed it." She hesitated at the door. "Quinn, thank you for everything you've done for Sarah and me." His eyes, still clouded with sleep, met hers. Haven't done anything special. You saved us, she said simply. Something passed between them then, a current of understanding that went beyond words. Millicent felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze, and she quickly turned away. "Supper's getting cold," she said over her shoulder, escaping down the hallway. Spring came to the Colorado territory, bringing wildflowers to the pastures and new calves to the herd. Millicent planted a vegetable garden beside her cabin, with Quinn breaking the soil for her, his powerful shoulders flexing as he worked the plow. Sarah learned to sit up on her own, her happy babbling filling the cabin with sound. One warm afternoon, Millicent was kneading bread dough when a rider approached the ranch. She recognized the town sheriff and felt a flutter of apprehension. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch just as Quinn walked up from the corral to greet the visitor. "Sheriff Wilson," Quinn said with a nod. "What brings you out this way?" The sheriff removed his hat. "Got a letter from back east, Quinn. Thought you'd want to know right away." "Your brother Daniel passed. Influenza." Millicent watched the color drain from Quinn's face. "When?" "About a month ago, according to the letter. I'm sorry." Quinn stood very still, his face a mask of control. "Thank you for bringing word." The sheriff glanced at Millicent, then back to Quinn. "There's more. Daniel's widow can't manage on her own. She's asking if you might take in their boy. He's 4. Quinn's jaw tightened. "Of course, family is family." After the sheriff left, Quinn disappeared into the barn. Millicent hesitated only briefly before following him. She found him sitting on a hay bale, his head in his hands. "Quinn," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Daniel was my younger brother, always sickly as a child. I thought moving east would be better for him, away from the hard work of ranching." He laughed bitterly. "Some protection I provided." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You couldn't have known. His boy, my nephew Matthew, I've never even met him. Now I'm all the family he has left." "Not all," Millicent said gently. "He'll have me and Sarah too." Quinn turned to her, surprise evident on his face. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to." She placed her hand over his. "You took us in when we had nothing. Let me help you now." His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. "Millie," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. She wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly his mouth was on hers, gentle at first, then with growing urgency. His arms encircled her, pulling her against his chest, and she felt the steady thump of his heart against her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day I found you in the bakery." Millicent felt tears spring to her eyes. "I was so broken that day." "No," he said firmly. "Desperate, maybe. But I saw your strength first, the way you were ready to sacrifice everything for your daughter." His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "I admired you before I ever loved you." The word loved hung in the air between them, momentous and transformative. Millicent felt a weight lift from her heart, a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. "I should be in mourning," Quinn said suddenly, pulling back slightly. "It's not right to find happiness in the midst of sorrow," Millicent finished for him. "Life doesn't wait for the proper time, Quinn. I learned that when Thomas died with Sarah not even a day old in my arms." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "We'll send for Matthew right away, and then, if you're willing, I'd like to speak to the Reverend about another matter entirely." His meaning was clear, and Millicent felt her heart soar despite the serious circumstances that had brought them to this moment. "I'd be very willing to hear what you have to say to the Reverend." Matthew arrived on a stagecoach 2 weeks later, a solemn little boy with his uncle's gray eyes and a mop of dark curls. Quinn lifted him from the stage with gentle hands, introducing himself as Uncle Quinn and Millicent as Miss Millie. The child said little at first, watching them with wary eyes, clutching a small wooden horse that had been his father's. Sarah, now nearly 8 months old and curious about everything, studied the newcomer with equal interest from Millicent's arms. "This is a lot to take in," Quinn told the boy as they drove back to the ranch. "You just ask if you have questions, all right?" Matthew nodded, his small shoulders hunched beneath his too large coat. That night, after both children were asleep, Matthew in a hastily prepared bed in Quinn's house, Sarah in her cradle in Millicent's cabin, Quinn knocked softly on Millicent's door. "He finally fell asleep," he said, his voice low. "Cried for his mama." Millicent's heart ached for the child. "It will take time for all of us." Quinn ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of his uncertainty. "I spoke with Reverend Baker today. He can marry us next Sunday if that suits." Despite the unorthodox proposal, Millicent felt a smile spread across her face. "Yes, that suits very well." His answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I never thought I'd have a family of my own. Always figured I'd live out my days as a bachelor rancher with nothing but cattle and horses for company. And now I can't imagine a life without you and Sarah in it, and Matthew too." He squeezed her hands. "We're a patchwork family put together from broken pieces, but I think we might fit just right." Millicent rose on tiptoes to press a kiss to his lips. "I think we might at that." The wedding was a simple affair held in the small church in Redemption Creek. Bart stood as Quinn's best man, while Martha, the former housekeeper who had become a friend to Millicent, held Sarah during the ceremony. Matthew, still quiet but beginning to warm to his new family, carried the rings on a small cushion, his face solemn with the importance of his task. When Reverend Baker pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn's kiss was tender and promising, a seal on the new life they were building together. The summer of 1873 passed in a golden haze of happiness for the Hayes family. Quinn taught Matthew to ride a gentle pony he'd purchased specifically for the boy, and Millicent watched with pride as her husband's patient instruction gradually brought the child out of his shell. Sarah began crawling, then pulling herself up on furniture, determined to keep up with her new brother. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Quinn and Millicent would sit on the porch of the main house, which was now truly a home, and talk about their plans for the future. "I want to expand the herd," Quinn said one night, his arm around Millicent's shoulders. "Maybe buy the Jenkins property to the east if old man Jenkins ever decides to sell." "And I want to expand the garden," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Maybe plant some fruit trees. An apple tree for pies. Your apple pies." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You know, when I first saw you in that bakery, I never imagined you'd be such a fine cook." Millicent laughed softly. "When you first saw me in that bakery, I was trying to trade my baby for bread." Not exactly a recommendation for my domestic skills. His arm tightened around her. "You were trying to save her life the only way you knew how. Don't ever be ashamed of that." She turned to face him, placing a hand on his cheek. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I'm the lucky one," he insisted. "You and the children you've made this place a home, made me whole in a way I never knew I needed." As autumn painted the aspen groves gold and red, Millicent discovered she was expecting a child. Quinn's joy was boundless, his protective instincts even more pronounced than usual. "No more heavy lifting," he declared, taking a basket of laundry from her hands. "And Bart's wife is coming over to help with the cleaning." Millicent rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "I'm having a baby, Quinn, not coming down with consumption. Women have been working while expecting since the beginning of time." But she didn't truly mind his concern. It was born of love, after all, and after years of struggling alone, being cared for was a luxury she hadn't known she craved. Matthew, now 5 and fully integrated into the family, was fascinated by the idea of a new baby. "Will it be a boy like me or a girl like Sarah?" he asked at breakfast one morning. "We won't know until the baby arrives," Quinn explained patiently. "But either way, you'll be a big brother again." The boy considered this seriously. "I think I want a brother. Girls don't like to play cowboys." Sarah, now approaching 2 years old and fiercely independent, banged her spoon on her plate in apparent disagreement, making them all laugh. As winter settled over the ranch, bringing snow and quiet days, Millicent often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Just 1 year ago, she had stood in that bakery, desperate and alone, willing to make an unthinkable sacrifice for her child's survival. Now, as she sat by the fire in their comfortable home, watching Quinn read a bedtime story to the children, her hand resting on the swell of her growing belly, she marveled at how life could change so completely. And they all lived happily ever after, Quinn finished, closing the book. Again. Sarah demanded, her vocabulary growing by the day. Tomorrow night, Quinn promised, kissing her forehead. Now it's time for all good cowboys and cowgirls to go to sleep. After the children were tucked in, he joined Millicent by the fire, pulling her feet into his lap and massaging them gently. "Happy?" he asked, his eyes soft in the firelight. Millicent smiled, thinking of the desperate woman she had been, the strong wife and mother she had become. "More than I ever thought possible." Quinn's hands moved from her feet to her rounded belly, cradling the new life growing there. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that day we met, in the bakery," she supplied. He nodded. "I went to town that day for fence wire, didn't even need bread. But something made me step into that bakery at just that moment. Divine providence." She suggested with a small smile. "Maybe." He leaned forward to kiss her gently. "All I know is that when I said you and Sarah would eat at my table, I never imagined you'd end up owning the table too." Millicent laughed, the sound bright and free in the warm room, and the man at the head of it. "Always," Quinn promised, gathering her close. "Always." In the spring of 1874, Millicent gave birth to a healthy boy they named James Thomas Hayes. Quinn, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door throughout the long labor, wept unabashedly when the midwife placed his son in his arms. "He's perfect," he whispered, sitting beside Millicent on the bed so Matthew and Sarah could see their new brother. "Look what we made, Millie. Look at our family." Millicent gazed at the tableau before her, Quinn cradling their newborn, Matthew leaning cautiously against his father's side, Sarah bouncing with excitement on the edge of the bed, and felt her heart might burst with happiness. From the depths of despair in that bakery to the heights of joy in this moment, her journey had been one of both heartbreak and healing. Quinn had offered her more than bread that day. He had offered her a chance at a new life, a family made stronger by the broken pieces they had each brought to it. "I love you," she said, reaching for his hand. "All of you." Quinn's smile was as bright as the Colorado sun streaming through the window. "And we love you, Mrs. Hayes, now and always." As baby James began to fuss, Quinn carefully transferred him back to Millicent's arms. The infant quieted immediately at his mother's touch, his tiny hand curling around her finger with surprising strength. "Strong like his mama," Quinn observed. Millicent shook her head, thinking of all they had overcome together. "Strong like all of us." Outside, spring was transforming the ranch. New calves dotted the pastures. The garden Millicent had planted was showing the first green shoots, and the apple trees Quinn had surprised her with last autumn were heavy with blossoms, promises of sweetness to come. Life on the frontier would never be easy, but with love and family to sustain them, Millicent knew they could weather whatever storms might come. From the moment Quinn Hayes had declared that she and Sarah would eat at his table, their lives had been inexorably linked. Two lonely souls finding in each other exactly what they needed most. "Together," Quinn said, as if reading her thoughts. "That's how we'll face whatever comes next." "Together," Millicent agreed, surrounded by the family that had been built from both choice and chance, bound by love stronger than any hardship. And in that moment, in the warm bedroom filled with the sounds of their children, Millicent knew with absolute certainty that the desperate woman in the bakery was gone forever, replaced by someone who had found not just sustenance, but joy, not just shelter but home, not just survival but love.